Apologize. I will have that. Well, hello, everyone. Welcome. We've just opened the waiting room, and so we'll wait just a moment before we start today's webinar. So take a moment, get settled. If you have a cup of tea or a coffee beside you, take a moment to pause before we start today's webinar. Well, hello, everyone. Bonjour tout le monde. Thank you so much for joining us today. Welcome to an Impact Investor's Journey. Today, we will learn how to use the Impact Investing Guidebook as a support tool, and we'll also share tools and tricks on starting your own path of impact investing. It is so wonderful to see everyone that is with us today. Please feel free to take a moment to introduce yourself in the chat. Please include your name and also the community foundation you're with as I introduce myself to you and run through a few of our housekeeping items for today's webinar. For those of you that I've not met, my name is Tracy Vavrick, and I'm a member of the CFC team. And again, thank you so much for being part of today's session. I am joining you today from my home in Calgary, Alberta, and I acknowledge and pay tribute to the traditional territories of the peoples of Treaty 7, which includes the Blackfoot Confederacy, the Tsuut'ina First Nation, and the Stoney Nakoda, and the Métis Nation of Alberta. Recently, I was at an event in Calgary, and I had the opportunity to expand my reflections and learnings in ways I can continue to strengthen my actions towards reconciliation. I was asked to consider how I can challenge the systems that create the need for resilience, and the systems that are also in place to understand the differences between what is inclusion and what is belongingness. We also discussed at that time, it's important to understand that it takes a grouping of individuals to create belonging. And they identified this through the identification of a braid, that a braid of women creates belonging. So I'm holding space for these thoughts and how I can strengthen the braids and be part of the healing journey and actively build an inclusive but caring future, which is centered on peace, friendship, understanding, and belongingness. And I thank each of you for joining us today, and I hope you can take a moment to consider your own connection to the land and the original caretakers of where you live. I also appreciate each of you for your commitment of exploring ways you can continue to strengthen your foundation and also your community. So as we get ready to dive into the webinar, just a couple really quick housekeeping details for you. We are in a Zoom meeting, and so what this allows for is more dialogue. And so please keep your microphone muted during the presentation, and we'll have opportunities to have discussions throughout today's webinar. And if you have questions as we go through today's session, please pop them into the chat box, and we'll be incorporating and collecting your questions for a short Q&A and also for discussion throughout today's session. Today's session is available in 2 languages, in English and in French. And to access the French and the English interpretation, you'll see a globe at the bottom of your screen. And if you just click on that globe, you can switch between English and French. I am very excited now to go in to introduce our speakers for today's session. Someone that's very familiar to each of us. We are joined today with Kelly Goche from Rally Assets, and Kelly will be leading our session. And as many of you know from previous conversations, she is very passionate about community foundations and the work that we do, and has been guiding and supporting us in various ways. And I say thank you first to you, Kelly, for that. Kelly is the president of Rally Assets, and for 2 decades, she has helped clients create impactful portfolios. And she's worked with a wide range of asset owners to design and implement impact investing and to create positive outcomes for people and the planet. Do apologize for that. Kelly also serves on the board of the Responsible Investment Association. And Kelly is joined today from a few friendly faces that I'm excited to introduce to you, one including Ren Lang. Now, Ren is an investment director at the McConnell Foundation, where she leads the foundation's impact investing work. And prior to McConnell, Ren was an investment director at the Big Society Capital, which is the UK's leading social impact investor, where she co-led on impact property investment work, helping to demonstrate the significant role that private investment can play in tackling housing affordability. We're also joined today with some wonderful faces from our Community Foundation members. We have Ian Johnson, who is the Director of Investments at the Victoria Foundation. Welcome, Ian. Ian and his family moved to Victoria in 2017, where he worked as the Chief Risk Officer for a top-ranked investment advisory team. Ian joined the Victoria Foundation's Investment Committee in 2020 and came on board as the Foundation's Director of Investments in 2022. When Ian's not working or playing with his wonderful two young ones, his beautiful soul children, you'll find Ian at one of the local tennis courts. Awesome, Ian. I bet you can do that year-round, play tennis year-round in Victoria as well. Yes. We're also joined today by another leader from the Community Foundation Network, and that is Nicole Daw. Nicole is the Executive Director at the Community Foundation of Newfoundland and Labrador. Nicole is a fantastic community builder whose mission in life is to make the world an even kinder and more connected place. Nicole began her career as a music teacher before transitioning into art administration with the Lady Cove Women's Choir and Shalloway Youth Choir. Nicole holds a Master of Business Administration, Bachelor of Music, and Bachelor of Music Education with Memorial University. Nicole enjoys spending time with her husband, Andrew, and their daughter, Ellie, and her large extended family, and curling up with a cup of tea and a good book. And Nicole and I have shared many stories about those moments. So as we get ready to move in today's webinar, I also wanted just to share take this moment to share that we also have a tremendous guide that we're popping into the chat, and this is our Impact Investment Guidebook. This project was a partnership between Community Foundations of Canada and Rally Assets, and it was designed this recent spring to specifically to support community foundations as they continue to explore and to map out and to build the journey upon your impact investing opportunities. So please do take a moment to download the guidebook, and I know Kelly is going to be speaking on it further today as well. And with that, Kelly, I am absolutely honored to turn today's webinar over to you.
Thank you, Tracy. Lovely to be here. Nice to see some of you. And thank you to Nicole and Ren and Ian for joining me today to talk a little bit more about their journeys with their organizations and inspire all of you to move along in your own ways. So as Tracy said, the guidebook is sort of the foundational piece for today's conversation, and hopefully folks have had a chance to check it out in the last few months. The links are in the chat for you to look at it. And really what I wanted to sort of set the stage here was around why we did it, what its purpose was, and sort of how to use it. And so for those that may have been around for a while, you know that this is the third iteration of this guidebook that we've done. And so this has been over many years that we've sort of worked on this as a tool for the foundation sector, to help to give a resource that was really practical, that helped to address some of the challenges that folks are facing in doing this work. And so, what has changed from the last guidebook to this one is not really so much the practical advice, but a little bit around the context, a little bit around the definitions and the terminology that we use, and with some updated examples and stories and sort of touch points of where folks are at and some of the new strategies that are evolving. So you'll find lots of that good stuff in there. In terms of the way that it's broken down, so we have sort of the why, the what, and the how. And then the last section is on legal, because you always have to have a legal section at the end of any document. And so in thinking about how to use this, it's 50 pages, it's meaty. The why is really for those of you that are trying to gain traction, that are trying to engage your board, your investment committee, that are trying to help folks understand why this is an important thing that a community foundation should consider. It's more that visioning and that existential piece around why would we do this? Why does this align with our work and our mission and what we're trying to accomplish? The what starts to then dig into what is impact investing, a little bit of the 101 level setting type of dialogue, some myth busters in there of the questions that we all get asked all the time, some of which we will tackle today. And then lots of examples of different funds and different foundations that are doing this work and how they've gotten started. So a little bit of that base layer. The how section is where most of the content is, and that's really the tactics. And it's designed to be a step-by-step guide for you to help you unpack how to move from setting a vision, securing buy-in and working with your stakeholders to help get permission to move forward, and then really into the nitty-gritty of the strategy. What are the key things that we need to think about in building out an impact investing strategy? And then what are the key implementation roadblocks and tasks and the pieces, and how those two work together? Because we all know that a strategy that sits in isolation on a shelf is not very useful to anybody. It needs to be real and implementable and rooted in your context, not somebody else's. And I'd say that this guidebook really is exactly that. It's not a one size fits all. It's here's the pathway, and here are different folks' experiences to help you figure out what works best in your community and with your stakeholders. So that's sort of the context around the guidebook itself. These guidebooks that we've done, they tend to stand up pretty well. They sit there for a few years, and they've been really useful. We've had great feedback from members around how this has been a helpful tool for them in bringing people together to start to do this work and figuring it out. And all the work that Rally has done in these years, like this is the process that we follow, right? So this is not rocket science. This is for design to help share our knowledge and help unlock some of the potential that sits within the community foundation sector. The legal section at the end was provided by Miller Thompson, who are great friends to community foundations and have supported a lot of you. And so it is not a legal opinion. It is more a little bit of guidance and refreshed update on some of the key questions that get asked from a legal perspective that should at least give you that first layer of sort of that question asking that you may have at your board or your investment committee. So that's the overall framework. Our plan for today is to hear directly from our guests around their journey and how impact investing has sort of unfolded for them. And then we've saved a good portion of the time for a discussion. We have some questions that we want to tackle, but also really keen to hear from you about questions that you have. And Ren, Nicole, and Ian are happy to answer any question you throw at them. So they are keen and ready. So maybe we'll start with Nicole. Nicole, do you want to give us a bit of background on Newfoundland and the journey that you've been on?
Yeah, happy to do that, Kelly. Thank you. So we are very much still in a discovery and exploration journey. We're about a year or so into that, just trying to figure out what we're doing. And we're kind of trying to solve for two things in Newfoundland and Labrador as we're doing that. So both how are we having as many of our resources, which includes the funds we steward, and for context, we steward a little more than $2 million in funds, which is both smaller in the kind of foundation network, but also an immense privilege and to be able to do too. So we're both trying to solve for how do we have those funds earning in the best way. And then the other piece is sort of looking at the overall kind of social finance and impact investing context in Newfoundland and Labrador, and what are some of the resources that might be missing that we can help with. So we've gone about this in a really like partnership driven way. We're working with the Center for Social Enterprise, who are actually looking at having a student-led impact fund that would potentially go alongside another fund, and they're working with Propel Impact, who are great at sort of the student-led side of those pieces that they're kind of connected in. And then our other major partner is the community sector of Newfoundland and Labrador, which is like the voluntary charity for community organizations in the province. So since probably the end of last year, early January, we've just been working. We first did kind of just a mapping of like what is happening, what's available. And then from there, we kind of dove more deeper into looking at, we have a chart of like, I don't know, 12 different kinds of social finance instruments and what is currently available and what feels like they could be a gap. And I think the big thing that we're always trying to keep in mind here is that social finance is a tool. And while we don't have as much of it in Newfoundland and Labrador as we think we would like to, we also know there are other kinds of resources that we need to be bringing to bear in the province too. So we're really trying to look more holistically at kind of the charitable and nonprofit revenue model moving forward, and how all of that fits. So we're also trying to get thriving nonprofits into the province and just really figuring out how this feels like a very holistic look at how we move through all of that. So that is a little bit kind of about our journey. I'll add that I'm always happy to share all of the resources we've done are kind of an open Google link. So if anyone ever wants any of the documents we've kind of created that sort of share our process and what we've been moving through, we're always happy to do that. So next I think next year, we're doing a research project with Propel and the Center for Social Enterprise and the Community Sector Council, which is doing a bunch of surveys on kind of financial resilience in general in the sector, and then doing some interviews again to really think about what are the missing kind of financial resources and capital that we need to be figuring out how to bring to bear alongside of some of the capacity development that need to happen. I don't know if there was anything else you were hoping I was going to talk about, Kelly.
No, that's great. Thank you. And I love, how you're talking about right-sizing the process for your community and your community needs and your capacity and your resources, because that's often one of the biggest stumbling blocks that folks find is, whether you have 2 million or 200 million, like what's the right size and the right resonance for us. So that's super important. Thank you so much, Nicole. Ian, do you want to go next?
You haven't lost me. Sorry about that.
Great.
I just noticed I'd moved my computer and I noticed that I was getting low on battery, so didn't want to disappear here. Okay, so I've got a little presentation, Kelly, if I'm able to share that.
That is up to the CFC backend folks.
Yeah, you can go ahead and share your screen.
Perfect. Is everybody able to see that?
Yeah.
Perfect. Okay. Okay, so the and everyone can still see that? Perfect. Okay. So the Victoria Foundation started our journey into impact in 2018. The board committed to investing 5% of the common trust into impact investments. Our objectives at that stage were to enhance alignment, so being aligned with our vision, our mission, and our values, generating impact, inspiring giving, and continuing leadership. Our three guiding principles were prioritizing impact, having a flexible mindset, and identifying gaps. And our learning goals were to develop the sector landscape, develop an understanding of the product landscape, and identify key partners and integrate reporting. So on the spectrum of responsible investing, we were looking at market impact and impact first. So as an example of market impact, which is market rate returns, we had the Mackenzie Green Chip, which is sustainable and environmental themed investment. And that is actually one of the top performing investments in our portfolio since we put it in 2018. It's performed phenomenally well. Rally Total Impact Fund is also market impact. Impact First Community Forward Fund we've invested in. And more recently in the Thrive Impact Fund, which some of you may be aware of, which is a locally based. Our thematic focus was local economic growth, climate themes, housing and infrastructure, inclusion and reconciliation, and sustainable use of natural capital. So this year, with Kelly's team at Rally, after 5 years, we did a impact strategy renewal. And the key things that came out of that were increasing from a 5% allocation in impact investing to up to 15%, from 5 to 15% over the next 3 to 5 years. So if you see the little bullseye that we have here, in the early stages, we're looking at doing Canada and global. They're far more liquid investing, so we can ramp up to that up to 15% a lot more quickly. But the long-term goal, and which is something I want to talk about here, is building out capacity to increase our local impact investment, having a bigger impact in our community and on Vancouver Island in general. So we see, over the next 3 to 5 years, partnering with potential investors and actually building that capacity in-house. And that's sort of the stage where we're at, where we're trying to figure out, how do we do that? What do we do in-house, and what capacity do we build? And then who are the key partners to be able to build out that capacity for local investing in the community? So Basma Majerbi, who some of you may know, is a professor of sustainable finance at University of Victoria. She's on our impact committee, and she sent us her MBA dream team, 4 amazing students who are doing a capstone project this year. And the capstone project, the goal of that is to do a feasibility study on creating a local impact fund, whether it's a sort of a special purpose endowment or an actual fund that we run, or that we partner with potential local investment managers. So they're going to do a landscape scan. They're going to engage with donors, and this is a big thing. You see, younger donors are very interested in impact investing, and so we're trying to find out, what do they want? Like when a donor comes in, and if they want to put all of their money in impact, like for example, Sandy, our CEO, would like to do that, and that option does not exist. So if we can create a separate endowment where people can have the option to have all of their money working in the community at all times, 100%. We think that the donors would be very interested in that sort of idea. And then we're looking at partnerships and then models and structures, right? Like the social enterprise fund in Edmonton is a similar model, but they've had some challenges in the way that they built that. So we're looking at all of the potential models and thinking about how we go about building that. I may or may not be out of time, so we can get into more details about sort of the ideas that are really just in the conception stage here. And so we've got a lot of thoughts about how we might build something like that at this stage.
Super. Thank you, Ian.
No problem.
I love this last piece on local impact and really bringing that research piece in and the lens of what is happening in your local community. And I think so much of what we talked with you about was around what does the existing capacity look like now, and not over engineering an investment strategy with constraints on what's happening in your local economy, but how do you build that, right? Because in this world and within the community foundations, that local piece is so important, but we know that the capacity is not there in most regions for doing that local piece meaningfully right now. So how do we build to that? So that's great. Thanks for highlighting that.
No problem.
Okay, Ren.
Yeah, I'm loving many of the themes already, and I want my own MBA dream team. So I think I'm gonna snap that from you, Ian, and find my own dream team to help with a few of our initiatives.
We're happy to share if anybody wants to talk with them, because one of the ways that we were able to engage with them was, if we can build a model here, it's replicable elsewhere. So it's, it's something that could benefit a lot of foundations.
And I think making use of that generational interest too, and that new talent coming up through business schools is going to be really critical to get all of this off the ground. So very cool to see. So at McConnell, we have been active in impact investing since 2007, which was probably around when Kelly and team were thinking about this field too. It wasn't in the state it is today. And so it was a very different opportunity set when we began, and a lot of kind of co-development and thinking about what could be possible. It might be possible within Canada and internationally to an extent, but certainly in the beginning, our focus was on that ecosystem building role that a foundation could play within the impact investing market, because we were seeing what was happening elsewhere and kind of the more nascent stage of impact investing within Canada. And McConnell felt like there might be a role for a foundation in helping to really galvanize some of that work and that effort in the early days. And our portfolio really grew quite holistically over the years. We only had one formal target before this year, and that was 5% in impact investments, and that was set in 2015. And so our portfolio really grew just by virtue of we would make an investment and then track its performance from an impact and financial standpoint, and just kept growing the portfolio. Not everything was a success, of course, just like it isn't in any investment portfolio, but on the whole, the picture was emerging in a very positive way. And that just meant that the momentum and the effort and the energy devoted to impact investing was increasing materially over time. And there was less interest actually in the traditional investment portfolio side of what we were doing. And it really wasn't until about 2 years ago, that we started thinking about what our actual goal should be within this space. We had about 20% in impact investments at that time. I should preface that by saying it's predominantly, almost exclusively invested via fund managers and predominantly in the private markets still. So that's what our portfolio looks like. To date, 20% at that point was in impact investing. And we decided to take a step back and really do what the handbook sets out in terms of setting out a strategy for what our impacts, intentions, and ambitions were over the next 5 years. And through a lot of really deep work with our board and our investment committee, we set out a strategy to commit the entire endowment to impact investments within the next 5 years. And that is very much an ambition. It's a commitment. The hard part comes in actually implementing that. But alongside that commitment came a whole host of new tools from the investment due diligence standpoint that helped reinforce our investment committee and board's confidence that we could at least give this our best try. We had seen the likes of Inspirit Foundation, who made the commitment many years ago and achieved it, and were so generous with the information they shared about how they did that and the track record they built. So our ambition really is to meet that 100% commitment within the next 5 years. That will be across asset classes. So at McConnell, we have $650 million in our endowment. And a large portion of that is in the public markets. So we both need to look at impact investing in the public markets and in the private markets. 30% of our portfolio is with Canadian managers at the moment, and the rest is international. But we very much, similar to what Ian and Nicole have been highlighting, what drives our and motivates us with impact investing is the local impact we can achieve on Canadian soil across communities. And we would love to bring more and more of our impact investments back closer to home over time. So that's certainly something we would love to do. The last thing I would say, just in terms of how our portfolio is structured, is we have program-related investments, and those we define to be sometimes more concessionary in nature. It could be below market rates of return, often into newer, more emerging fund managers or just innovative propositions that are higher risk. That right now is only 5% of our endowment, and we would love to increase that proportion over time as well, because we see some of those more exciting impact-led propositions that deliver true deep community impact happening within that part of our portfolio. The rest of our portfolio is mission-related investments. So those are institutional quality, institutional grade opportunities that deliver ideally market rates of return. So that's the bulk of what we refer to as impact investments. But what we are energized by is that program-related investment side, that 5%, which we hope to grow significantly over time.
Super. Thank you, Ren. I think so. If I can pull a few threads out of that, I think hopefully what the audience is hearing, one is I love this commonality of willingness to share. And so I think it is inherent in the community foundation world, the willingness to share, but it is not inherent in the finance world. And so where finance and community intersect in the concept of impact investing is where some of these interesting intersections happen, right? And so I think when people put their finance hats on, or even your investment committees or finance directors within your organization, that the thought that other people will share what they're doing is a new one for most folks. And yet that is how community foundations operate. And so you heard Nicole, Ian, and Ren all talk about working together around how they've benefited from other people's sharing, their own willingness to share. And so want to make sure that folks are picking up on that note as you think about your own journey, to ask for help, because it's the most collaborative space in finance that I've ever worked in, and there really is an openness and a willingness to work together. So thank all of you for pointing that out. And so hopefully the audience sees a little bit here that we have intentionally organizations of really different sizes, that have different challenges and obstacles that they're working with. And we're going to talk a bit about that, and different regions, right? So different regions have different challenges, both based on scale, based on the nuances of that region. And so there's complexity in all of these pieces. Okay, so we're going to jump into the discussion a little bit, and we have some questions that we have ready. But for the folks in the audience, please feel free to put your hand up and ask verbally, or put them in the chat, and I'll pull them from there. But maybe we can start with kind of a general one, and we're gonna balance the challenges and opportunities in this conversation. But maybe we'll start a little bit on the challenges. And so, Ian, maybe I'll put this one to you. So as you talked a lot about the beginning of this work where you've had success and sort of some of the things you're working on. What are some of the gritty challenges that you've really faced in going from one hurdle to the next?
Well, I think one of the initial challenges, and it's Serkan, my predecessor, who is the former director of investments here, maybe faced it a little more than I did in the early days, but it's getting the board and the committees online. There's some resistance. There's a feeling that impact investments involve concessionary returns, potentially more risk. So that's been a challenge. At this stage, my challenges really relate around figuring out an implementation plan. Also, reporting and monitoring of the impact is a big piece that was part of our initial plan that, that really we haven't made a lot of progress on. So that's the next step. And so we'll be looking, at who we can partner with and how we can do that. And certainly Rally is top of the list on that one. And then local capacity, and then how do we get that next step, right? How do we create something local, and how do we figure out how to do that so that donors have an option to have have a 100% impact option when they come in and make a donation.
Thanks. The governance piece, I want to kind of pick up on that because it is really fundamental to the models that everybody kind of operates in. You have staff, board, other committees, donors, and partners all sort of participating in this in different ways. And so it can be a real like herding the cats situation to create momentum to move forward. Wondering if Ren or Nicole want to jump in on that piece, and where Ian's kind of started that thread around how they've been successful or pieces that you've faced.
Go ahead, Nicole. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I think one of the things that I guess I didn't really know was going to be like a helpful sort of moving along thing is that we actually, I think I'm still figuring out all the percentages because we're just like really getting our fund data to where we want it to be. But we have like a decently high percentage of spend down funds, which I feel like for fund holders and board and things like that, like they want it to be invested, but there isn't sort of this focus on like preserving like the capital like in forever. So there feels like there's a bit more tolerance for like kind of what returns can sort of look like, knowing that people do want some earnings, but mostly to just sort of cover our fees and like things like that. So I think that's a piece that I didn't really realize, that like I think your fund structure can sort of like help to sort of move these things along. And I think the biggest challenge, and it is still a challenge, is like just where to start. Like we've done like a pretty good job of mapping, and I think we've got some ideas on like where to go into, partly because of what the strengths are of people around the table or what the opportunities might be. But I'm still like a bit like, yeah, where do we start? So I think that remains a challenge, that it keeps feeling like kind of big to try and figure out really like specifically like to make a like, because we're still kind of in explore. So figuring out exactly where to kind of dip our toes in, like for real time, is still a bit of a challenge.
Yeah, I think your observation on fund size is really insightful, and I've seen it play out across lots of organizations. And not to suggest that the other two organizations, which have larger endowments that are here with us today, have experienced this, but I think in a lot of cases, a smaller endowment size creates less stress for and less feeling of weightedness on the investment committee of maintaining that and growing it in a way that allows for more creativity and more innovation. And not to say that there isn't the same level of prudence required in stewarding that, but there's less of a like death grip of control, which is what some other larger pools have really struggle with. But so I think that's really insightful. Ren, what about you?
Yeah, I think it's just so interesting to me, no matter what stage of the journey you're on, the challenges really are quite similar. And for us, honestly, having joined McConnell just as we were kicking off this new strategy and commitment, I was quite surprised by the amount of education and awareness building. I reached out to Kelly throughout, I think, because it was surprising to me that even for an organization who had made impact investments for over a decade, that there was still such a need to get everyone on a level playing field with respect to their understanding about what impact investing even is. And Ian, to your spectrum, where it sits on that spectrum of responsible investment, where we're at the start of the strategy and where we were planning to get to depended on everyone having a very comprehensive understanding of the different options within that spectrum. And the fact that when we're referring to impact investing, we are really referring to quite a narrow box within that. And to get everyone on that same page from the beginning actually did take quite a bit of time. And then there's still, even though we could say, okay, here's 20% of our portfolio that's in impact investments, there aren't always realized returns attached to that, but we had quite a solid track record to show. Even with that data, the discussion we've raised already about the notion that impact investing is predominantly concessionary is really hard to shift and to take out of the bag of considerations that you go into when you're thinking about how much of this to do or even whether to do it at all. So no matter where you are on that impact investing journey, a lot of these narratives and these discussions just reemerge and reemerge. And I don't think that's a negative thing, but I think it's going into your strategy setting process, using this handbook, for example, with that in mind, that there will need to be this kind of education base setting period where you're all learning together so that you know what the appropriate first step for your respective organization is, or the appropriate next step. So I think, yeah, similar challenges actually that we experienced on the governance front. But then once you get there, there's a collective ownership, obviously, of what you're setting out to achieve. And that's really helpful too, because it does feel like once you dip your toe in the waters with impact investing, people do tend to get much more enthusiastic about it quite quickly, I find. And Kelly, I hope you found, and Nicole and Ian, over time, I think that momentum just builds, and that's really exciting to see too.
Yeah, for sure. And the governance piece cannot be underestimated. And I think the challenge with it too is, as you rightly pointed out, even organizations that have been doing this for a long time, there's change in organizations, there are staff changes, there's turnover on committees and boards. And so it's kind of keeping up with that. Even if you've been doing it for a while, and making sure that as you bring new people in, they're kind of coming on that learning journey with you, because the tide can turn really quickly. And so, you mentioned before, so I think there's two good pieces to pick up on here. You mentioned before around failures and having failures in your portfolio, and whether that happens early or late. I have seen that really change the trust and confidence of a committee, because failures are going to happen. They happen in mainstream venture and non-impact. They certainly happen in small enterprises. They happen in the public markets all the time, right? The public markets portfolios are bouncing up and down and going crazy, and the committee doesn't focus on that. But, one social enterprise has a failure, and there's usually a high degree of concern. And so it's sort of right-sizing the response to that. But I think, so you've kind of talked a little bit about the return spectrum. Nicole and Ian, are you guys still finding that you're having to fight the age-old myth that if we do this, we're going to lose all our money? Do you feel like you've got there, or is it still present in your conversations?
It's still present, but I would say we're making progress, and I think that education is going to be a big piece, and that's going to be a big focus of what we're doing: educating the committees and the board, educating staff, educating the community. That's a big thing. It was funny. So the way that our governance works, our impact committee reports up to the investment committee, which then goes on to the board, and one of our recent investments, we're part of a coalition, which some of the other foundations might also be, making a loan to the Canadian Canoe Museum, and that investment was at prime plus 75, but we put a vote through to because prime was 3 when we did that, and now prime is 7, and it's also backed by a donor. That if they default, the donor will make a 5 million donation. So it's very secure. And so I thought it was funny that our impact investment committee chair, reporting to the investment committee chair, pointed out that this was secure, and that we weren't going crazy with the foundation's money in lowering that interest rate. So it's certainly in the back of minds, but we're making progress.
Nicole?
Yeah, and I think we have a bit of a different mindset, just because I feel like we don't have, I think, quite as strong a piece around kind of protecting the endowment and inflation and sort of those return perspective. So I guess the idea is that like we're already kind of spending down even some of our restricted assets. And so the fact that some of it will be getting repaid even if it wasn't earning, is still like, a cyclical version of the capital. So I think we haven't again, this is like it's and I know this too. Sometimes it's easy when you're in like the imaginary stage, like to be like, oh yeah. And so I'm sure there'll be some of that surfaces as we really get into. I even noted this. I had social finance options in my finance committee plan for next year. And I was like, oh no, it's the investment strategy overall and landing on our continuum and like working through that, even like in talking through this. So it's like, I'll be curious to see how we kind of move through that. And we're really fortunate that we have someone who does impact investing in the province on our finance committee and our board. So yeah, I imagine that they'll really help to give some confidence.
Yeah, I think that early stage is so lovely and idyllic. It's sort of like the beginning of a relationship, or like I describe it as the Lego stage, where you're like, I'm going to build a castle and there's going to be a tower and a zoo in the backyard. And then you like hand that to an architect and they're like, well, let me smash your castle and tell you what's realistic, right? So it's kind of that idealistic beginnings, but those are really important, and it's important to hold on to those ideals and the kind of key principles of what you will not give up, right, as you move forward, because you need to make capacity trade-offs and practical trade-offs and all of those things. But Ren talked about this too, in terms of how, like, what are the key principles that you're holding to as you start to do things that are harder and more complex. Nicole, maybe you can talk to us a little bit. I want to shift gears a bit into diversity and equity and Jedi approaches, and sort of how, the populations lens, if we will, is a really important part of impact investing. But as you talk about different investments that might be kind of housing or climate or those pieces, thinking about the equity pieces and the population lens on top of that can be overwhelming. And so how have you guys started to think about that in the context of your region?
Yeah, and we also think about that a lot geographically too, because we have, rural and remote kind of in there as well, in addition to a whole bunch of identities. So we haven't kind of layered that onto this conversation yet, other than that we do kind of equity-based granting throughout everything we do. And I'm sure that will kind of go over into here. So a lot of it has, for us anyway, in these early stages, has just been like, again, having good education for our broader board, and then just always trying to ensure that the folks on our committees and on our board are as representative as possible of the, the broader province that we serve, and that the spaces that we're convening also are really welcoming places for folks to maybe push on some of the ways that current systems aren't necessarily going to serve groups in the province. So that's kind of what we've been doing to date.
Yeah, the rural piece is really important. It's certainly like a big focus of the work that we're doing with the Social Finance Fund, to think about how we bring in more rural inclusion, and how we think about, as you are, and you and I have talked about, the intermediary layer, and like what are the types of institutions and things that we can put in place outside of the major centers that will then facilitate, exactly what you're talking about, but that create those points. Ren and Ian, you want to jump in on DEI and Jedi and how that's showing up in your strategies? Ren, maybe you go first. I want to hear more about the public market side of it.
Oh dear. On the public market side, it's the hardest part of what we're doing and investigating right now. And then if you add in the diversity layer, of course, that's critical throughout everything we do. But what we've been finding challenging is actually integrating those lenses within our investment process and our tools in a way that's substantive. So we've used tools such as the Racial Equity Owners Asset Lab framework, which is helpful to check and challenge where we're at and where we want to be when it comes to racial equity investing, for example, which is more than just diversity, equity, and inclusion. We've been actively thinking about how we can intentionally direct more capital towards traditionally underrepresented or structurally marginalized groups and communities. And we don't have the answers there yet. And that's what I'd want to highlight is I think it's working with communities like this and networks like this to share tools and approaches, which has been critical to us getting off the ground with some of this. Equally, on the public market side, we've been working with Share, which is another organization that focuses on that engagement piece. There's a separate subgroup of investors focused on racial equity investing. So just being able to very honestly share successes and failures, again, what we're practically doing to try to advance our own tools and approaches in this space has been essential, I think, as we've tried to do more. But it was one of the key learnings we highlighted in our 2022 impact report is we plan to do more on the diversity, equity, inclusion side. We've covered it off from the ESG, the representation standpoint, but that's not nearly enough. So it's a focus of ours this year. But yeah, working with these sorts of groups and communities is the only way we'll really kind of advance our approaches collaboratively, I think.
Thanks. I think it's really important for folks to hear that even an organization that's as large as McConnell and also sort of revered as being a leader in this space, that there's lots of things that are still in progress and that are a struggle and that are not figured out because this work is evolving. So yeah, it would be great if you could share it. If you have the link for that Equity Lab in the chat, that would be awesome. We've used the due diligence 2.0 and we integrated that a few years, which helps to think about how you do due diligence with emerging managers where there aren't sort of the traditional pieces. And that's been a helpful tool as well. Ian, do you want to jump in on this one?
Yeah. So inclusion and reconciliation is sort of one of the thematic focuses of our impact investment. And, you know, if you look at the last two investments, Thrive Impact Fund is women-led. And then our latest investment, which we haven't deployed yet, but is one of the local nations, the Songhees Nation, is doing the first on-reserve housing development, and so we've got a commitment to make a loan to that. So sort of developing our relations with local Indigenous nations is certainly an area of top priority for us as well. But it is a lens, you know, on the overall investments as well as a specific thematic focus.
Yeah, thanks. And I think it's important too to contrast between. And I know both you and Ren are doing both of these things, but in the community for gender equality cohort, we talk a lot about how you're doing something and then what you're doing. So investment selection and the pieces that you actually invest into, having that equity lens and being targeted to reconciliation or gender or other pieces, but also who you do it with, right? And the managers that you select, the process that you go through and reflecting it in both pieces, because both are so important for systems change and how we use our capital in that way. So I think that's awesome. Okay, Tracy's going to cut us off in a minute. So maybe final thoughts from the three of you, you know, wins, inspiration, what would you like to leave these lovely folks with in terms of moving forward? Nicole, I'll go to you first.
Yeah, I think in other kind of, I mean, this is a sometimes small community population wise, giant geography wise, which sometimes makes it even trickier, very spread out. So I think just the way we've always had to do things here, we just have to figure out how to pull together as much as we can. So just, I think, figuring out kind of other folks in your community who are going to want to move in this way and work in this way together, and yeah, just trying to figure out how you hold it as much as you can in a bigger way. We're in it, the folks we're doing it with, we're kind of part of a bigger kind of financial resilience in the community sector here, and this is one part of that. So yeah, just trying to look for ways to pull together, which I know is what all of us who are in kind of smaller communities or more remote places as Newfoundland and Labrador is kind of do every day.
Ren?
Yeah, just like a note of excitement. I think there's never been a more interesting, exciting time to be starting or continuing in impact investing. There are so many opportunities, so much momentum in Canada, and I think the likes of the Social Finance Fund hopefully will make it easier for community foundations, for foundations and investors of all types to get involved, because even just looking at their activity and what they're focused on and some of the new initiatives that will emerge on the back of that will provide easier inroads for those who are slightly earlier on in their journeys. So I'm really excited about that new landscape we have to work with here.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, I'd echo that. It's amazing the people I met. Just before this meeting, we had Thrive Impact Fund's community gathering. Phenomenal, great energy, very exciting. So very exciting space, and it's really developing. So there's going to be a lot more opportunities in this space. And then it's a little bit of following the leaders. So I'd like to have a chat with Ren as you guys rush out to 100%, and we can learn from your experiences along the way too.
Awesome.
And I would just say, sorry, Kelly, I'm always happy to have one-on-one conversations. That's just how we work and learn best. So please reach out to us at any point.
Thank you. I was going to make that offer on your behalf anyway. So thank you for saying it directly. I just want to thank the three of you for being here and sharing your time and your wisdom with us. Every time that I have a chance and the privilege to be with the CFC folks and have these conversations, there's always really interesting things come out. And I think to the point around community and how and why we're all here, we need to do these things together. And so everybody here is happy to share their small piece of wisdom with you. And hopefully this was a helpful conversation and forming your own thoughts about how you move forward. So thanks for joining me.
Thank you, Kelly. Thanks for all of the great work you do as well.
Oh, Ren, I just have to share a moment of appreciation. Ian, you said it so well. Thank you, Kelly, for all the work that you do and for how you continue to support community foundations as they navigate this fantastic journey. And, I share with you today that as I was pausing and holding space for Nicole, for your story, Ren, for your learnings, and Ian, for the place that you are today, I was also looking at who's with us, the foundations here. And I can picture each of the different foundations also having these discussions, exploring these questions, holding space for these learnings. So on behalf of everyone that's with us today, so grateful for each of you for taking the time to offer to your peers your learnings, your expertise, and all those other things that you have gathered as you've ventured through this journey. I'm also really mindful that we have members here that are very much desiring to grow in the impact investing area. So I am going to also offer to everyone, not only has Ren said, let's have a coffee, not only is Kelly available, I know Ian is, and Nicole loves to have a coffee together, even if it's a virtual moment in time. We're also going to be diving deeper into this within some of our work through our finance listserv, so our finance members, and for those members that are part of some of the peers, we will be having some further discussions in the new year at our peer gatherings. So just for people to continue to know there's more conversations, more up and coming as we go into the future. Really mindful here. We are very close to the top of the hour. And again, just want to say thank you to everyone for joining us. We have added the guide book into the chat again. So if you haven't accessed it, please do so. And we also would love for a moment in time for you to answer a few questions for us. We are going to pop our poll up, and the poll is the time for us, for you to provide some feedback. And this poll provides us with knowledge and understanding of our sessions and how we continue to grow and enhance our offerings to you as community foundations. So do take a moment to answer the poll as we get ready to close off. And speaking of closing off, can you believe we are very close to the end of November? And as everyone is aware, through the Learning Institute, through Caltoon's fantastic department and portfolio, we offer various sessions throughout the year. But we pause in December. December is the time of holding with your foundations, with your donors and the work that you are undertaking. So we're mindful that this is the last event through the Learning Institute for 2023. we will be bringing forward the curriculum for 2024, and we're very excited to share that with you in the future. So do watch in our newsletter for upcoming events and activities. And if you're not on the newsletter, please register today. We also have the link that's being popped into the chat for you so that you can also continue to receive up-to-date information, events, and relevant resources for you in your work that you do. If you're a board member, if you're a staff member, if you're a team member of any sort. So thank you again, Kelly, Nicole, Ren, Ian. This discussion was absolutely fantastic, and I am so grateful we held the time and space and that you were able to be part of today's session. So thank you again. And to all, wish you a wonderful day. We'll look forward to connecting again soon.
Great. Thanks, Tracy. Thanks, everybody.